Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us this morning. Welcome to our traditional presentation. Last year, here, I showed you, in line with our strategy, that 2018 was the year of the rebound. And today, you will see that our 2019 performance has indeed boosted this momentum. As evidenced each and every year, we are a profitable company. In 2019, our EBITDA stood at the upper end of the projected range. We reduced carbon emissions in a way where, at the same time, we met all our financial targets. We have successfully reconciled the development of our activities with disciplined investment, rigorous efforts to reduce operational costs, and making a good road into to consolidate our results. It also validates the relevance of our three priorities as set out in 2025 through CAP 2030. CAP 2030 is based on a deep and widely shared conviction that plentiful and competitive low-carbon electricity is essential if we are to overcome the challenge of the century, limit global warming. In energy policies, in France, in the United Kingdom, our second largest market, and now in the European Union through the Green Deal, we know that reducing carbon emissions, becoming carbon neutral, is the objective that has been set out to all of us. EDF is determined to undertake a key role in achieving this huge ambition. With our strategy, CAP 2030, with our 98% carbon-free energy mix, with our position as the leading investor in energy transition in France, we are already a driving force behind the decarbonization of the economy here in France and also in Europe. But we are not going to stop there. We are already deploying all our resources and skills so that we can continue to play this role in the future. By the way, it is no accident that we have been selected as the official electricity supplier for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Paris in 2014. Indeed, our expertise and our legitimate status as a low-carbon leader, this makes us the natural choice to ensure that the Paris 2014 Games will be the first carbon-neutral Games in history. We are rising to all tomorrow's challenges today through continual transformation. We are testing new work organization methods. We are fostering collective intelligence and innovation. We are also embracing new businesses, essential for the success of energy transition. This includes low-carbon hydrogen, aggregation solutions for decentralized renewable energy generation, and as demonstrated earlier this week, blockchain technology. Let me address the women and men working for EDF Group and extend my thanks for their commitment and for their professionalism. Each and every one of them has contributed to the results that I will now outline. All our 2019 financial targets are met. EDF Group's EBITDA has shown a strong growth rate of 8.4%. It is at the upper end of our projected range at 16.7 billion euros. We have been able to achieve these very positive results by successfully taking advantage of favorable market price conditions, of reducing our operational costs, and of achieving a good performance both in our renewables activity and in EDF trading. In 2018, we had set a very challenging target of reducing operational expenses by a total amount of 1.1 billion euros with a starting point in 2015. We have met this objective, and moreover, we have exceeded it by 100 million euros. Investments have been effectively controlled and are even below the upper limit set due to the exceptional disposal achieved by EDF Renewables of 50% of the LNG offshore project off the coast of Scotland. Later on, Xavier Gier will be able to walk us through the impact of this operation on our financial statements. The cash flow target, excluding investment in Linky and Hinkley Point projects, the target of greater than or equal to 600 million euros in 2019 was largely exceeded, multiplied by 3. This reflects good EBITDA performance and control of net investment, as well as a lower working capital requirement. The disposals program is continuing over the 2019-2020 period. In 2019, we signed or realized transactions of 1.1 billion euros. Our target of a range between 2 and 3 billion euros is maintained for the end of 2020. The net financial debt to EBITDA ratio stands at 2.46, which is well in line with the target that was lower than or equal to 2.7. Yesterday, during the board of directors, the company has decided to propose to the annual general meeting to offer shareholders a dividend of 0.48 per share for the 2019 financial year. This corresponds to a payout ratio of 45% of net income. In December 2019, we already paid an interim dividend of 0.15 per share. Let me go through these highlights. I would like particularly to draw your attention to, first, the strengthening of our commercial momentum, thanks to a renewed range of offers and services. Second, to a sharp increase in the development of all renewable energies. Also, significant progress is the implementation of our 3 long-term plans, le plan solaire, le plan stockage électrique, electricity storage plan, and le plan mobilité électrique, electric mobility plan. The important milestones that we have achieved in our nuclear project and international success stories, especially in the hydropower sector. I would also like to add that we had a positive momentum in Enedis, our distribution activities. Let me now expand a bit on each of these items. Regarding customers and services, I'm delighted to note that we are starting to reap the rewards of the marketing offensive we launched 2 years ago. We now have more than 500,000 residential customers that have opted for our market offerings. We pursue this marketing offensive with new solutions that go hand in glove with our customers' needs, such as Mes Jours Zen, or the first regional offer called Vert Électrique Bretagne, Brittany. Just 3 years after the launch of our first solar self-consumption offer, we are the number 1 provider in France with 20% market share. Supporting renewable energies and becoming actively involved in the fight against climate change is an aspiration shared by our corporate customers. We are meeting this need by investing in a new market segment, corporate power purchase agreements, corporate PPAs. We have already signed 4 such agreements in the space of less than a year. With regard to local communities, we have created Hynamics, our young subsidiary specialized in low-carbon hydrogen, only low-carbon hydrogen. Hynamics has had its first success, like, as an example, what we have in Dijon. We work with the city to install electrolyzers in order to feed hydrogen-based buses and trucks. With regard to energy services, growth is gathering pace. We are expanding our foothold across the channel with the acquisition in the UK of Breathe, a company which is specialized in energy efficiency in commercial buildings. In France, Dalkia has continued to forge ahead with a year marked by renewing or signing several new contracts, both in heat networks and in energy performance, especially for industrial customers. Easy by EDF is our service platform, which we launched about 1 year ago. It serves residential and professional customers in France. We are getting ready to extend our heating-based service range over the coming weeks with the integration of a smaller company we acquired, and it is called My Chauffage, My Heating. Accelerating in the development of renewable energies, in that space, 2019 was a year of strong growth. We have doubled, when compared to 2018, the construction starts of wind and solar facilities. They represent today more than 4 gigawatts. We have taken major steps to achieve our ambition of developing offshore activities in France and abroad. We are the leader of offshore wind power in France. We have won 4 out of 7 tenders, with a total slightly above 2 gigawatts. France's first offshore wind farm, close to Saint-Nazaire, is already under construction. 2 more farms will kick off this year. The 4th farm off the coast of Dunkerque will have the greatest capacity. We won it during the summer of 2018 against 6 other consortiums. This illustrates our ability to develop highly competitive renewable projects. In 2019, we have begun construction of our LNG Scottish wind farm. International prospects for development are very promising, with 2 gigawatts under development in the US and 500 megawatts in China. We have just announced our entry into the Irish offshore market, and we will develop and build a new wind farm close to 1 gigawatt of installed power called Codling. In the solar sector, our activity is also showing strong momentum, with an increase of 31% of installed capacity when compared with 2018. Talking about renewable, just a few words on hydropower. In 2019, we finalized the extension of La Coche. This is a renewed pumped storage hydropower plant in the Alps. It was, because it's now in operation, our second largest work site in France, increasing the facility's capacity by 20%. In 2019, we have consolidated our rank. We are the leading French and European renewable energy generator. We are the number 1. And in the world, our position is number 5. That said, winning the prize for the highest installed megawatt capacity is not our core target. As you well know, developing new projects rather than buying them is what sets EDF apart, and what really provides our added value for the good of the planet. We are proud of this. We believe this is the right way to drive forward energy transition, by building, not by acquiring. Recently, we have defined a new framework to issue green bonds. This will make it possible to further support our ambition to foster growth in renewables, whilst reinforcing consistency between our strategy and our funding tools. A few words on the French solar plan. Preparation of the solar plan, which should pave the way for EDF to gain 30% market share between now and 2035, has increased significantly in 2019. 2,000 hectares of land have now been secured to host future facilities. This is equivalent to 7 times more than what we had 2 years ago. We have already received all necessary approvals to build 500 megawatt of solar facilities. This is 5 times more than 2 years ago. And in the first quarter of 2019, we acquired a French developer, Luxel, with a total project portfolio of almost 1 gigawatt, which we now will get prepared to build. If I say a few words about the electricity storage plan, we have also made significant progress. Our realized or agreed project portfolio stands today at 0.5 gigawatt. I would just like to illustrate with 3 major projects. The 800 megawatt solar power station called Noormidelt 1, which we have secured in Morocco. This station will supply electricity up to 5 hours after sunset, thanks to its hybrid system combining electricity storage and solar power. Second illustration, in Petit Canal, the wind farm in Guadeloupe, which I visited 2 weeks ago. This facility is now connected to a battery system that stabilizes power delivered to the network. The battery is very close to the wind farm. And a third illustration, we now have 3 battery storage solar farms, combining batteries and solar farms in the US. The third one is called Arrow Canyon. It is in the state of Nevada. Furthermore, we have recently acquired a company called Pivot Power, based in the United Kingdom, to enhance our project portfolio, and the first storage sites to be developed based on the Pivot Power portfolio will be constructed this year. The mobility plan is designed to make EDF Group the leader in Europe from 2022. We already supply 210,000 cars, corresponding to 1/3 of our objective at the end of 2022. We have developed our dedicated subsidiary, Drive, dedicated to smart charging. We have now commissioned the first smart charging stations in France. And with regard to the operation of charging stations and access to these charging stations, yesterday evening we announced the acquisition of PodPoint. PodPoint is the leading charging solutions company in the United Kingdom. This is a genuine change of dimension for EDF in the mobility sector. 60,000 charging stations have been already installed in the UK by PodPoint. So we are now getting very close to our 3-year target of 75,000 charging stations in Europe. Let me now turn to nuclear. Nuclear, alongside with renewables, these are the cornerstones of our low-carbon power generation strategy for the next 10 and even 30 years. As you know, in December we presented an action plan called Excel. We aim to restore the level of excellence and industrial mastery on which the French nuclear power sector reputation was built. Excel translates the conclusions of the report, which Jean-Martin Folz wrote and publicly explained in October last year. It translates the report from Jean-Martin Folz into specific actions. The stakes are very high. We need to obtain the performance levels needed to restore the trust of both citizens and political decision makers. During my presentation of Excel 2 months ago, I indicated that the plan will be implemented under the supervision of an executive director for industrial quality and skills. This person will be one of my direct reports. And today I'm really happy to announce that this responsibility will be entrusted to Alain Transer. Alain Transer is an industrial background with more than 25 years in the experience in the automotive sector in another French major group, Peugeot, PSA. Alain successfully managed several large-scale projects, and I'm really confident that Alain will succeed in his new role, which is of overriding importance for EDF and for the entire nuclear sector in France. Alain will shortly take up office, and I'm, of course, publicly welcoming Alain, who will very soon be part of EDF. Let's move on to our EPR projects. At Flamanville 3, we have defined a scenario by which we will use remote-controlled robots to repair the penetration wells which have to be repaired. Our objective, as you know, is to complete fuel loading at the end of 2022. Our on-site teams are currently finishing the hot functional tests. In China, the second EPR reactor on the site of Taishan has begun commercial operations. Both EPRs, Taishan 1 commissioned in 2018, Taishan 2 commissioned in 2019, both EPRs are living up to their promises and have achieved excellent performance levels. Altogether, the station has already generated 16 terawatt-hours. This provides evidence of the quality of the EPR technology. In Hinkley Point, the project succeeded in achieving its first major industrial milestone in the middle of 2019, fully in accordance with the schedule. This milestone is the completion of the common raft for reactor number 1. The completion of the common raft for reactor number 2 is due to follow mid-2020. With regard to the French nuclear fleet, I am keen to stress 2 important points. First, the success of the 4th 10-year visit in Tricastin 1, which is the first 900 megawatt reactor to be approved for a 50-year operating life by the French Nuclear Safety Agency. This success bodes well for the rest of our program of Grand Carénage, which is to extend the lifetime of all our units. Secondly, 3 weeks ago, the French government launched an open consultation on a far-reaching reform of the current regulatory framework for existing nuclear generation. This is a major move, since the text submitted for consultation highlights what we have long said. We have long said that the ARENH mechanism is dysfunctional and outdated. I have repeatedly stated that such a reform is crucial, both for EDF as a company and for the success of the energy transition in France. The challenge is through a new regulation to create a new symmetrical system that will provide EDF with a fair remuneration for its nuclear generation, while at the same time introducing a ceiling that will eradicate the risk of excessively volatile prices for end consumers. EDF will participate in this open consultation in the same way as other market players. The final shape of this new regulatory framework will depend on some new legislation applying the directions which will have been decided through the discussions between the French government and the European Commission. International, we are focusing on selective development and especially progress on large hydroelectric projects. 2019 was indeed marked by 2 key success stories in the hydropower sector. After 5 years of construction, we commissioned our new dam in Brazil called Sinop. It has a 400 megawatt capacity. We are also the operator of the facility. And in the start of 2019, construction of the Nachtigal Dam in Cameroon began, a facility that will supply 30% of the country's electricity as of 2023. With now the work site in full swing, the Cameroon government is happy and has shown that by already appointing EDF as the exclusive developer of a new facility of a similar size, which is down the same river, the Sanaga River. The new dam will be called Kikot, and we are in exclusive discussions to build Kikot after we complete Nachtigal. We are also providing our expertise in hydropower engineering in many areas of the world, and I would like to stress 2 important achievements. In Dubai, the pump storage hydropower plant that we are designing for the Dubai utility in Hatta has entered its construction phase. Not far away in Israel, the pump storage hydropower plant in the area of Gilboa is almost finished and will soon begin its commercial operation. That was for hydropower, but I also like to mention a very innovative concession contract we signed with the government in the Ivory Coast, la Côte d'Ivoire. We are partnering with local companies, and we will build the largest biomass power plant in West Africa. The name of the project is BOVR. It will be powered using waste from palm tree plantations. This project is both a low-carbon project and demonstrates the benefits of local circular economy. A word on Enedis. I would like to highlight the very positive momentum in our electricity distribution independent subsidiary Enedis. Enedis is a proximity driver between EDF Group and the regions and territories of France. As such, I would like to draw your attention that a couple of years ago, we renewed our concession contracts, and we have now signed with 170 territories the new concession contract for a term of generally 30 years. This illustrates the trust in the partnership between Enedis, the various territories in charge of the electricity matters, and also the very high stability of Enedis in its activity. I would like also to commend Enedis staff for their tireless efforts in response to the exceptional climate events, and we have unfortunately lived through several of them since the summer of 2019. These efforts now allow electricity being restored very quickly in the homes that are concerned by these storms. Those collective efforts are illustrative of the strength and the determination of the public service in electricity, alongside the territories and our customers. Enedis also has a key role in energy transition and is involved in the mass development of renewable energies. In 2019 alone, to illustrate this, 30,000 renewable energy facilities became grid connected on the French territory. Enedis has now exceeded the symbolic number of 50% of Linky smart meters being installed in France. This brings the total to more than 23 million at the end of 2019. As you know, the Linky program is an essential driver for controlling electricity consumption and reaching climate targets. Thank you. I will now hand over to Xavier Gir. He will walk you through our results for 2019, and I will be back with you in a few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean-Bernard. Good morning, everybody. I will now present you our 2019 financial results in more details. And before detailing these results, let me first remind you that the group applied the accounting rule IFRS 16 on leases starting 1st of January 2019. The group decided to apply the modified retrospective approach, and under this approach, there is no restatement of comparative figures. Therefore, the financial statements at end of 2019 are presented with no prior year restatement. However, organic changes in EBITDA are obviously calculated on a comparable basis and exclude the impact of IFRS 16 application. In addition, Edison's E&P activities are treated as discontinued activities under IFRS 5, and 2018 numbers have been restated accordingly. As already said by Jean-Bernard, 2019 was a year of strong growth, and we have met all our financial targets. Looking at the key figures, sales amounted to 71.3 billion euros, a 3.5% organic increase versus 2018. EBITDA came to 16.7 billion euros, up 8.4% in organic terms. Net recurring income stood at 3.9 billion euros, a 58% increase compared to 2018. Net income group share raised to 5.2 billion euros. This very strong growth is essentially linked to the fair value adjustment of the dedicated assets portfolio in the context of very supportive capital markets. I will come back to this specific item later in the presentation. Net financial debt raised to 41.1 billion euros, mainly as a consequence of three elements: the negative group cash flow of minus 0.8 billion euros, the IFRS 16 implementation with an impact of minus 4.5, with an impact increasing the debt, of course, of 4.5 billion euros, the repurchase of some hybrid securities at the end of the year, since these securities are treated as equity under IFRS standards, which increased net financial debt by 1.1 billion euros. Net financial debt to EBITDA ratio stands at 2.46 times, significantly below 2.7 as expected. Let's now have a look at the group's 2019 operating performance. As already said, the EBITDA raised by 8.4% organically. Nearly all segments were up compared to last year. The largest contributor is France generation and supply activities, which benefited from favorable energy prices. EDF Renewables also posted a solid growth with a strong contribution from sell-down operations. Regulated activities, Dalkia, Framatome, Italy, and other international activities also contributed to the group's performance, as well as EDF Trading reported in the other activities segment. UK and other activities are the only segments not growing. A few words on cost cutting. Our target was to reach in 2019 a 1.1 billion euros cumulative reductions versus 2015. We have exceeded this target by more than 100 million euros, with a further economy of 278 million euros in 2019. Cuts have been delivered mainly by France generation and supply, but most activities contributed. This reflects our efforts on purchases and on staff costs, as you can see on the right hand of the page. Nuclear output came to 379.5 TWh, a decrease by 13.7 TWh, or 3.5% compared to 2018. This is the consequence of a high level of planned maintenances, such as the successful fourth 10-year inspection visit of Tricastin, the first of a kind of the 900 megawatt fleet to pass that mark. It is also linked to a number of outages which have been extended, in particular in Flamanville 1 and 2 and Palwell 4. In November, 3 reactors of the Cruas station have also been shut down for around 1 month following the earthquake that occurred in the area. Mild temperatures at the end of the year also led to lower demand and increased modulation of nuclear plants. Overall, lower production had a significant impact on EBITDA, as I will detail later, but the unplanned shutdowns and extended outages that occurred during the last quarter of the year had a relatively limited impact because unavailability did not cost much, as purchases were made at low prices. French net hydro output fell to 37.7 TWh, down 6.8 TWh versus 2018. As you can see on the right-hand side of the chart, generation was affected by challenging hydro conditions versus normal for the first 9 months of 2019, whereas 2018 was the highest level of output in 15 years. At the opposite, the first quarter was 4 above average, representing an increase of more than 40% versus Q4 2018. As regards the EBITDA of France generation and supply segment, it was up by 16.1% organically to 7.6 billion euros. This substantial increase is mainly due to favorable price effects totaling an estimated 2.2 billion euros. This reflects 2 elements. First, the continued increase in power prices on wholesale markets between 2016 and 2018, which have been captured through our progressive hedging. And second, the 5.9% increase in the regulated tariff on the 1st of June 2019. In this respect, let me remind you that this raise should have taken place as from 1st of February 2019. The corresponding missing remuneration for around 600 million euros will be recovered over 2 years in 2020 and 2021. The 2020 part is included in the 2.4% tariff increase that occurred on the 1st of February 2020. Reduced nuclear and hydro output had a negative impact estimated at minus 899 million euros. Continued erosion of market shares in 2019, together with favorable elements in 2018 that had no equivalent in 2019, had an estimated minus 211 million euros negative impact on EBITDA. Operating expenses were cut by 342 million euros, through control of purchases and payroll costs, as I mentioned earlier. The group keeps on reducing support function costs. Operating costs on nuclear, hydropower, and thermal power plant fleet are also under strict control. Moreover, we put constant efforts to adjust retail costs to the erosion of our market share. EBITDA for the French regulated activities segment stood at 5.1 billion euros, an organic increase of 18 million euros, or 0.4% from 2018. This limited growth was dampened by an unfavorable weather in 2019 and was further penalized during H2 by exceptional weather events. These different elements had an estimated negative impact of 95 million euros. Changes in indexed adjustments to the TERP 5 distribution and transmission tariffs were partially counterbalanced by the tariff optimization operated by suppliers in connection with the rollout of Linky for a net estimated at plus 65 million euros. Growth in network connection services is continuing and made a positive contribution estimated at 25 million euros in 2019. And operating expenses were reduced by 83 million euros in this segment. Moving to renewables, EDF Renewables with EBITDA was up 33.5% organically to 1.2 billion euros. It was driven by development and sales of structured assets with a contributive EBITDA in 2019 of 560 million euros. It essentially reflects the sale of 50% of NNG, the Scottish offshore wind farm project. As anticipated, EBITDA from generation was essentially flat given the disposals that took place in late 2018 and early 2019, despite a positive price effect. SG&A costs increased to support the strong acceleration in development that Jean-Bernard commented earlier and that resulted in a record high level of projects under construction, 5 gigawatt, with 3.4 gigawatt for wind power, including 0.9 gigawatt for French offshore wind power and 1.5 gigawatt for solar power. Looking at renewables activities across the group, overall EBITDA decreased by 1% organically, which reflects the reduced hydro output. Total net investments in renewables amounted to 404 million euros. The decrease compared to 2018 is explained by the impact of the deconsolidation of the debt associated with the NNG project for 1.1 billion euros. As a whole, including the Nachtigal hydropower plant, the construction of a gross total of 4.8 gigawatt of renewable capacity has been launched in 2019. Regarding energy services, EBITDA of Dalkia came to 349 million euros, up 5% in organic terms. This rise reflects Dalkia's dynamic sales activity to win new clients and renew existing contracts with 80% that were renewed during the year. This dynamic encompasses both energy performance and heat network contracts. Continued deployment of Dalkia's operational savings plan also supported the performance and helped to keep overheads under control. Sales of energy saving certificates improved compared to 2018. Energy services also increased at group level with the contribution of Italy, Belgium, and the United Kingdom. In the UK, a build-up acquisition, Breeze, was made by Imtech 2 years after its integration within the group in order to further strengthen the energy performance business. Framatom's EBITDA was 527 million euros, including the margin realized with other EDF Group entities, corresponding to an organic growth of 3% between 2018 and 2019. Framatom's contribution to group EBITDA for 2019 stood at 256 million euros, also an organic increase of 3%. In a highly competitive market, Framatom's installed base and instrumentation and control businesses registered better performances in the US and Germany, but were affected by rising execution costs on certain French and export projects. A key highlight of 2019 was the signing of 2 important contracts with Rosatom that opened access for Framatome to the instrumentation and control market for the VVER reactors. Profitability of the component manufacturing business improved thanks to a step-up in production of equipments to replace steam generators and equipments for new projects. The fuel business benefited from sustained production levels and fuel assembly deliveries for the Taishan EPRs in China. Growth in the large projects business reflects progress on HPC with no impact on group EBITDA, compensating for the decline in business activity after the Taishan plant in China came online. Framatom's EBITDA also benefited from continued overhead cost-cutting. Moreover, Framatom had a successful year on the commercial front with an order intake amounting to 3.3 billion euros. The United Kingdom's contribution to group EBITDA for 2019 was 772 million euros, an organic decline of 4.6% from 2018. Regarding generation, EBITDA was impacted by the downturn in nuclear power output. Production totaled 51 terawatt-hours in 2019, down by 8.1 terawatt-hours from 2018, in the context of extended unavailability at Hunterston B and Dungeness B. It was counterbalanced by, first, an increase in capacity revenue, 309 million euros accounted in 2019, following the reinstatement of the capacity market in October 2019, and second, by higher realized prices for nuclear power, circa £4 per megawatt-hour. On the customer side, EBITDA was strongly hit by the introduction at 1st of January 2019 of a cap on residential tariffs for electricity and gas, the standard variable tariff. Against intense competitive pressure, the residential customer portfolio increased slightly, plus 2% compared to 2018, notably due to the transfer of TotoEnergies' customer base, and the business customer segment registered a positive performance. More generally, while 2019 marked the closure of the Kotam coal-fired power plant, the group continued investing in the energy transition in the UK, with 3 meaningful acquisitions. In storage, the acquisition of Pivot Power; in electric mobility, the acquisition of Pod Point; and in the energy services business, the acquisition of Breeze. In Italy, Edison further developed its renewable footprint and now operates 500 megawatts of net capacity in solar and wind. 2019 EBITDA reached 578 million euros, up 20.8% in organic terms. EBITDA for the power business was up 81 million euros, essentially due to the good performance of ancillary services, of renewables benefiting from the output of new wind farms for 165 megawatts, and of favorable hydropower generation. EBITDA for the gas business was also up as a result of better optimization of long-term contracts. In the supply business, the integration of gas natural customer portfolio is well on track. However, the contribution of this business was lower than in 2018 due to smaller margins on the residential customer segment for both electricity and gas. Lastly, a very positive development took place on the regulatory front in 2019 with the setting of a capacity market starting in 2022, which clearly strengthens the outlook for Edison. Looking now at international businesses on slide 28. EBITDA in the other international segment was up organically 36.3% to 339 million euros. In Belgium, first, EBITDA showed organic growth of 54 million euros, plus 38.6%. The principal factor in this growth was the return of nuclear plant availability, which had been very low in 2018, and the increase in wind power generation. Wind power capacities reached 519 megawatts, up 18% compared to 2018, which already posted a strong growth. Luminous is clearly the leader in wind generation in Belgium. Retail activities remained resilient despite a strongly competitive environment. EBITDA in Brazil also showed organic growth of 48 million euros, plus 60%, largely due to the plus 16% adjustment to the power purchase agreement price in November 2018. Furthermore, this growth reflected a good operating performance with a record level of availability and a smaller maintenance program than in 2018 and best conditions of gas supplies. One of the key achievements of 2019 for the international business was the commissioning of the hydropower facility of Sinop in central Brazil, a 400 megawatt power plant in which EDF has a 51% stake. This is the first international hydro completion since the dam of Nam Thun in Laos in 2010. Lastly, the other activities segment contributed to 505 million euros to group EBITDA for 2019, an organic decrease of 225 million euros from 2018. This is mainly attributable to provisions for long-term LNG procurement contracts that became onerous in view of the downward perspectives of medium and long-term spreads between the US and the European markets. There was nevertheless a high level of gas activities in 2019, thanks to growing competitivity of gas and better use of the group's capacity. On the other hand, EDF Trading delivered a great performance with a 733 million euros EBITDA, an organic increase of 18% compared to 2018, which was already a very good year. This rise was driven by high volatility on the markets and favorable positions on the electricity and gas markets in Europe, together with a good level of business in the United States. Through our JV with JERA, LNG, trading and optimization and LPG activities also contributed to this performance. Before moving to EBIT, let me wrap up these different elements and show you the main building blocks of our 2019 performance. As already detailed, largest positive driver was the increase in market prices in France and in the UK. There was, on the other hand, a strong headwind on the generation side, with lower outputs in France and the UK. The third building block is the net positive contribution of our sell-down operations in renewables, strong performance in trading, however partly offset by negative spreads evolution in gas. And last, continued OPEX cuts posted significant contributions to EBITDA growth. Let's now move on to the other items of the P&L. First, EBIT is up 23.9% at 6.8 billion euros. This development is first explained by the growth in EBITDA of 1.8 billion euros. Volatility on commodities had a year-on-year favorable impact of 866 million euros. This element is recording the net changes in fair value on energy and commodity derivatives, excluding trading activities, on contracts which do not qualify as hedge accounting, in particular in relation with Edison's gas positions. The 2019 variation is explained by higher volatility effects in electricity and gas. The net depreciation and amortization raised by 1.2 billion euros. The increase is of 585 million euros, excluding the impact of IFRS 16 for 634 million euros, foreign exchange, and scope effects. This is essentially explained by a volume effect related to newly commissioned facilities in the nuclear fleet, and to a lesser degree accelerated depreciation of the French coal-fired fleet from 1st of June 2019. The financial result for 2019 corresponds to a financial expense of 0.4 billion euros, an improvement of 4.4 billion euros from 2018. This change is mainly explained by, first, a positive change of 0.3 billion euros in the discount effect, due to a lower reduction in 2019, 10 bips, than in 2018, 20 bips, in the real discount rate used for nuclear provisions in France. At the 31st of December 2019, the discount rate for nuclear provisions was 3.7%, incorporating an assumed inflation rate of 1.4%, respectively 3.9% and 1.5% at the end of 2018. Second, a 4.2 billion euros increase in other financial income and expenses, of which 3.5 billion euros due to the fair value adjustment of financial assets held in the dedicated assets portfolio in application of IFRS 9 standard. This reflects strong performance of equity and bond markets in 2019, in sharp contrast with 2018. Net income, group share, came to 5.2 billion euros versus 1.2 billion euros in 2018. As detailed previously, the EBIT and financial result represented a combined increase of 5.7 billion euros compared to 2018. As regards income tax, in 2018, the income of consolidated companies before taxes was amounting to only 656 million euros and was including favorable permanent differences, in particular linked with disposals, leading overall to a negative tax rate. In 2019, the income of consolidated companies before taxes is amounting to 6.4 billion euros. The effective tax rate is 24.7%, lower than the French tax rate, notably due to some favorable permanent differences. The group shares in net income of associates was a positive 0.8 billion euros in 2019 compared to 0.6 billion euros in 2018. This positive 0.2 billion euros change is mainly explained by the increase in C&G's net income, which was driven by a positive fair value adjustment of financial assets. The group's net income excluding non-recurring items stood at 3.9 billion euros in 2019, up by 58% compared to 2018. Just a quick word on the post-tax effects of non-recurring items. In 2019, they stood at a positive 1.3 billion euros versus a negative 1.3 billion in 2018. Impairment losses have been recorded on some specific assets for a total amount of 0.9 billion euros versus 0.5 billion euros in 2018. The main element here was a 0.5 billion euros depreciation of the Edison E&P activities that are currently held for sale and treated as a discontinued activity versus 0.2 billion euros in 2018. Net changes in fair value of instruments and other items, including commodities volatility, are accounted for in non-recurring income and represented a gain of 2.9 billion euros post-tax versus 2018. Looking now at the cash flow. Operating cash flow stood at 4.2 billion, up 1.2 billion euros from 2018. The working capital requirement contributed positively for 0.4 billion euros. The net investments, excluding disposals, HPC and Lévy, decreased slightly to 11.3 billion euros. Disposals generated 0.5 billion euros of proceeds in 2019, essentially linked to the disposal of Alpiq shares, compared to 1.9 billion euros in 2018, which recorded the disposal of Dunkirk LNG terminal and of some real estate assets. The income tax paid increased by 0.6 billion euros, in line with the increase in the income tax described previously. Last, dividends and coupons paid on hybrids represented a cash out of 0.8 billion euros, almost 0.5 billion euros less than in 2018, as the French state and a portion of the other shareholders opted for scrip dividend. The cash flow, excluding Lévy and HPC, amounted to 1.8 billion euros, and group cash flow established at minus 0.8 billion euros. And let's now review the evolution of the net financial debt. We have grouped three specific items on the left-hand side of the graph. The first one is the 4.5 billion euros impact of IFRS 16 that we have already mentioned. The second one is the consequence of the buyout of hybrids. The third one is linked to two technical effects, foreign exchange and IFRS 16 impacts for 2019, for a total impact of 0.7 billion euros. And the right-hand side of the slide is summarizing the evolution of the debt by 0.8 billion euros, in line with the elements we have just reviewed for the group cash flow. The net debt established as a consequence to 41.1 billion euros at the end of 2019. This ends my presentation. I thank you, and I hand back over to Jean-Bernard.
Thank you, Xavier. Before we turn to Q&A, I would like to give you our guidance for 2020 and beyond. For the year 2020, we are setting an EBITDA target in the range of 17.5 to 18 billion euros. We are aiming to maintain operational expenses stable in constant euros and, like always, excluding service activities. Total net investment, excluding group acquisitions and disposals, will amount to approximately 15.5 billion euros. We are seeking to realize our 2 to 3 billion euros disposals plan for 2019 and 2020. This mostly consists of closing the disposals of Edison's E&P business, which we signed in July 2019, and of completing the CENG shares put option process that we initiated last November, for which nevertheless maybe closing could be postponed to 2021. For 2021, we have committed to a target of net financial debt to EBITDA ratio of around 2.6 in 2020 and lower than or equal to 2.7 in 2021. The payout ratio of net income will be within the range of 45 to 50%. And I would like to remind you that the payout option in shares will be available for all shareholders, and that the French government has already publicly committed to opt for scrip for the balance of the 2019 dividend to be paid in Q2 this year, and for the whole of the dividend due for fiscal year 2020. And this is the end of our presentation together with Xavier. I am very happy to invite him again to the floor, and together we will try to do our best and respond to your questions. Thank you. So, there are microphones in the room, and I know also that our friends who are connected through digital networks will be able to come in at the right time. So maybe starting question from the room, please.
Yes. Good morning, Emmanuel Turpin, Société Générale. I'd like to start with three questions, please. To continue on the topic of 2020 guidance, which you've just explained to us. The width of the EBITDA range, 17.5 to 18 billion, is almost fully explained by the range in nuclear production that you foresee for 2020, at least on my calculation. So if we focus on midpoint, I would expect that the midpoint of EBITDA is about the midpoint in nuclear production. Could you share with us some of the other main assumptions that you take into account for 2020? In particular, in 2019, you had a very strong performance in trading on very good gains for renewable DSSAs. How do you anticipate what do you build into your 2020 guidance? Flat on this trading on DSSA, or more conservative? On any other kind of parameters you can give us for 2020 would help us greatly. A subtopic of this question, or rather my second question, would be for generation in France. What is the level of price you've been able to capture through your hedges? A year ago, you were mentioning 43 euros per megawatt hour for 2019. What is the equivalent for 2020? On my last question is stepping back on what is going to be the main driver of the EDF investment case for 2020, which is the re-regulation of nuclear, or rather the new framework for nuclear prices. I think the government has explained that they wanted to, or they were ambitious enough to get an agreement with the European authorities by the summer. Could you explain to us, from your perspective, what are going to be the key steps, the key milestones that will take us to that agreement, on how confident you feel from what you can observe in those exchanges of the summer being a realistic horizon? Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe, Emmanuel, I will start with question number one, and number three, then go back to number one. And in the meantime, we may be able to show on the screen slide number 113, if I am not mistaken. So, yeah, I needed to ask him for which slide it was. I'm sorry, didn't know it by heart. So going back to your third question, yes, indeed, we have seen several signs that the French government has started extensive discussions with the European Commission regarding how to reform the ARENH. And we know that from already several months, if not quarters ago, the French government and even the French president stated that the ARENH is something that should be replaced by a more fair and symmetrical system, and he did talk about protecting consumers and at the same time enabling EDF to carry on with the nuclear fleet and the nuclear adventure of 50 years ago, which has demonstrated so great benefits to France and indeed to all of Western Europe. So these conversations are from what we know, and we are supporting them. We are not holding the conversations, but we are giving data and arguments to the French government, and then the French government is in charge of these discussions at administrative level. But there has also been some publicity about of Mrs. Bohr traveling to meet with Mrs. Vestager to discuss that, and we believe in good faith, and I think the French government has also had opportunities to say in good faith that we all believe that by the summer we should have an agreed framework. So that is what I can say at this stage. Now, regarding your first question, which is, you consider that if you take the midpoint of the electricity generation in France, and if you take the midpoint of our EBITDA range, you believe it's a short range. Well, if you said it's a wide range, we would have a question. If we say if you believe it's a short range, we have the question. Well, we believe all in all, we have years with some volatility. We have, of course, as always, a number of uncertainties, but also, and as we will demonstrate on page 113, we have secured already a lot of what is the main driver for revenues and profits, which is the price that we have secured for most of what we generate in France. Now, as you know, because I know you are very experienced, Emmanuel, you know that we cannot forecast with a lot of certainty what will be the revenues in our trading business. We cannot forecast with a lot of certainty what will be the exact production in generation that we will do. We cannot forecast with certainty what will be the climate. We have a very mild winter, but it has happened that we have very cold spells in November or December. We cannot forecast with a lot of certainty how much hydropower we can generate. Right now, our hydro dams are much fuller than they are usually because it's rained or snowed a lot, and there is a significant amount of available snow that will melt during the springtime. So we have a visibility that maybe we could have a good year in hydro, which was not the case last year. Okay. All in all, we believe that when we bake in all this in our model, we believe that what we are giving you as a range is a very fair reflection of where we should end up. And now, regarding French generation on page 113, here it is. So, the notional volume is 420 of fixed cost generation output. And the average price for our hedging, as you can see, has grown. And by the way, that's also why we have rebounded in 18 and 19, and that's why our EBITDA is growing in 20, because many other reasons, but the major driver is going from 38 from 46 in average. More questions? The croissants are still warm. Huh? More questions? Sorry? From the phone or web? On the phone? No? Emmanuel again?
I'm sure there are plenty of questions on the web, but while they come through, you had a very strong performance on renewables in 19, both operationally through new assets and also through your gains. You have clear long-term ambitions. Now, what I feel we're missing is in between right now on the long term. Could you help us, on the pipeline over the next few years, maybe Also in terms of type of contracts, maybe if you have average years for PPA or any item that could help us map out the performance of this division over the coming years. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So first, let me say that we are, I think, very candidly flagging that we had an exceptional performance in 2019 due to that very good acquisition and partial sale in a very short period of time of LNG off the coast of Scotland. So we should not be able, unfortunately, to do that every year. This is not something that is easy to replicate, although we'll try our best to find similar opportunities. But we cannot really build the business on such amazing transactions. Now, you have here on page 114 what we are projecting between 2019 and 2023. So you see our net capacity target, which is almost doubling from 9.6 to 18 gigawatt in installed capacity, and by a yearly increment that will reach 2.1 gigawatt per year, as you can see. So it's a lot. As of course, a lot of that will be now offshore wind. We've been striving to get this to fruition, and in the end, we are getting there. We have Saint-Nazaire and NNG in construction, both of them. So, of course, this helps, growing from 700 megawatt a year to 2.1 gigawatt a year. We have, of course, these 5 units to be built between now and 2026, 4 in France and off the coast of France and 1 in Scotland. And hopefully in the meantime, we'll have gone somewhere quite consistent also with our targets in China and Ireland, of which we talked just a couple of minutes ago, and the US. And then you can see the average residual duration of long-term contracts. So as you can see, our PPAs, to make it simple, have an average 13-year duration. Okay. Remaining. Oh, okay. So very often there are 20-year PPAs, and that would mean we are or 1/3 down the way.
On the capacity additions that you showed on the previous slide, that's the 2023 18 gigawatt is net, you said, so it's after all the disposals, right? And
that is a proportional calculation. So we have also another slide. We have gross capacity. The target is 32 gigawatt in 2023, and then net capacity after disposals, and we keep so the proportional vision, which is 18 as we've just shown.
Thank you.
So this is the gross capacity. And as you can see, it's vastly already developed, I mean, under construction or already secured, so 2/3 of gross secured. Then, of course, part is still to be developed, but it's based on a very strong pipeline. We could have also the slide on the pipeline for a gross target of 32. Maybe the slide of the pipeline, which is also very strong and very well balanced, which, of course, is the basis for this development.
And may I add something which you have not asked, but I'm really happy to say. You remember CAP 2030 project, which was to grow our renewables capacity, including hydro, from 28 to 50 gigawatt. Now, when you look, if you add the hydro system with where we will be in 2023, we now consider that what was a very ambitious target of 50 gigawatt of renewables is something that will probably be able to exceed. Because we will be revisiting in due course, no numbers today, but we are quite happy that one of the key CAP 2030 objectives for 2030, it really looks like we are going to exceed it, and by quite a significant gap.
Maybe some questions on the phone?
First phone question comes to the line of Olivier van Dusselaer. Please ask your question.
Good morning. Thank you very much for taking our questions today, and congratulations on the results. I just had 2 questions, if I may. The first one was on the regulatory reform. I think we are seeing forward prices maybe having dropped already now below levels that many market participants would have considered to be maybe the floor of what your new nuclear regulation might look like in terms of cap and floor. I'm not asking you to confirm the price level of cap and floor, but I wonder conceptually, would there be any discussions also ongoing, or could one of the conclusions of the consultation process be that it might be better to move to a CFD mechanism rather than this cap and floor system, because it's quite unlikely, I suppose, that wholesale power prices would fluctuate on a sustainable manner between that cap and floor, no matter where those ones are put. And I also suspect that the €6 per megawatt hour spread between that cap and that floor could still actually maybe represent some material volatility for you when we apply that to a bit less than 400 terawatt hours of generation. That could be more than €2 billion of volatility. I wonder if that's not still something actually quite material that you would want to see reduce. And then the second question, that's just on number. I wonder what the P&L charge of €3.1 billion from the discounting of provision was a bit lower than what I had anticipated. I was wondering if you could provide us any guidance on what that number might be for 2020. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Olivier. So Xavier will do his best on second question number 2. On question number 1, I think you're really discussing what really makes our life difficult. Why should we build, operate, extend lifetimes, maintain a very long-term asset, which at the end of the day may depend on gas prices, which, as we know, have a huge volatility. They are low today, and because of that, market prices have become low. And does anyone really believe that you can build an energy policy where you will supply electricity to hundreds of millions of people in Western Europe based on global commodity prices which have this kind of volatility? Especially when you think that, according to all publicly released documents, recently released documents, gas is a transitory energy. It should be dismissed by 2050. So you build a market which is based on an interim commodity. Does that make any sense? Regarding your second question, €6 range. Well, we are in a market-driven economy, and €6 is the range that the French government has selected for consultation, in order that for many weeks every year, or many years every decade, the price is a market price. But the government, through the consultation, also says it can't always be a market price, because if it is only a market price, then nothing will be built, or we will completely miss the carbon neutrality objectives, because we will have to rely on gas, which is maybe the least damaging fossil fuel. But still, it's a fossil fuel with, 300 grams of emissions of carbon per megawatt of electricity, where right now, we talk of countries like France achieving 10 times less or even better. So yes, there is a market-driven objective, because we are in a market-driven economy, but you need to build based on long-term, non-carbon emitting solutions.
On your question, Olivier, as regards the discount rate, I'm sorry, but we will not give any guidance on the discount rate. And in 2019, so the discount rate was reduced by 10 bips versus 20 previous year. So this improved the financial result by more than €300 million. We always apply for the same accounting method as far as this calculation is done. And you have noticed that we have considered that the inflation rate, long-term inflation to be considered, had to be reduced from 1.5 to 1.4%. So we'll see. I mean, of course, during the course of the year, and we will provide more information during the course of the year about that for 2020.
Okay, thank you very much.
More questions from the phone, maybe?
Thank you. Next question comes to the line of Rob Pullian. Please ask your question.
Good morning. Thank you very much. If I may ask about the UK nuclear output that you assume in your 2020 guidance, does that take into account the current expected restart dates? And there's a second part to this, if I may, on Hunterston. Given decommissioning is set for 2023 anyway, is there a potential that is brought forward in time? And then lastly, if I may look to the future, I think it's fair to say we're all very excited about EDF Green that will hopefully emerge from the other side of this reorganization. It seems exactly what the market would want. But can I ask when should we start to hear more about that? Thank you.
So maybe Xavier will answer the two questions, and I will take it back on green. But take the mic back from green now on the UK generation issues.
Yes, I mean we have taken. I mean in our guidance, as you see, some range. I think this is a reasonable range, and of course we have taken some hypotheses as regards the generation. The generation in UK could be improved quite significantly, depending on the reconnection date of Hunterston and Dungeness in particular. So this is why, of course, we have also this range to take into consideration different hypotheses, because they may be reconnected. Today we consider that they should be reconnected during Q2, but we all know that there are some discussions with the ONR, and so there are some uncertainties about that. And secondly, it's very important. I mean, even if Hunterston has to be decommissioned in 23, of course, it's important to reconnect this reactor and Dungeness also, of course.
Okay, on the question regarding evolution of our assets, the way we may reorganize after a new regulation framework has been agreed, and we know that we have to get prepared according to request that was made to us by French President Macron and by the government. In the meantime, we are getting prepared in order to reorganize our assets within EDF Group, of course. EDF is EDF. And we have to be ready to do so. Regarding timeline, as I said a bit earlier, we hope that by the summertime the frame is agreed, and then we can get into more details regarding Hercules project reorganization and the way we would implement a new asset organization within EDF Group. And I guess this is all I can say at this stage. We are working hard. We are consulting with the unions. We have a significant amount of discussions with the French government, so that if and when this becomes possible, we think we will be ready in order to implement that in an expeditious manner. It is quite likely that new legislation will drive the scheduling of what will have to be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So more questions from the phone, maybe?
Your next question comes on Vincent Irel. Please ask your question.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And as today is a special day, happy Valentine to all. So we had a number of questions on the nuclear regulation and the regulation plan. So obviously it's difficult to give specifics. We expect maybe to get some sort of approval on MOU in H1. So I will ask a couple of questions on specifics which we can communicate on, hopefully. Elisabeth Born is supposed to meet the European Commission again in Q1. Do we know what is the date for this meeting? Second thing, we have a consultation paper, white paper on the regulation. How long is it supposed to last? So when will we hear the conclusions of that? If we have to go through this, the second thing is when we look at the overall process here. We have a white paper. We're waiting for potentially having a sort of agreement with the European Commission. Then we would get probably an energy bill to go through Parliament before we got application decrees. Could you give us an idea of the overall process there, and importantly, of the process for European Commission approval? Just facts here. How does it work? What can you give us that would help us get some clarity on this topic? Thank you.
Yeah, this is not something we can get into many details because the range of possibilities is probably unlimited. I would just like to say that we believe that right now we are in time, although of course time is constrained, but we are in time that the reform could be fully implemented by 1/1/22. This is a target, this is not a commitment, but we believe we are in time for the reform to be implemented by 1/1/22.
Thank you very much on that. That's very helpful, actually. And the second follow-up question would be, we're talking about a re-regulation. We're talking about a fair return. So you say that you give the French government data and arguments. I guess you got a view of what is a fair return, and that will be subject to intense debate and scrutiny, I guess, when we got application decrees. Can you give us your type of level? What are you saying is the full economic cost of existing nuclear? Thank you.
This is, the economics are going to be worked on by the government based on some advice they are requesting from the French independent regulator, the CRE. From what we hear, the CRE is still working on this, and I cannot make any further comments.
Thank you. Trying my luck a third time on a different topic then.
The corridor to cover the cost plus a fair return. I mean, that's, but we all know that. Now the numbers are in the hands of the independent regulator, and I guess these are discussions that are being privately held between the independent regulator and the government, and I'm sorry I can't say more. Just the only thing I would like to say is that obviously for the company to succeed in changing the arena, there is a range which at one point in time we will not feel palatable. Okay, we have to achieve something which will be more friendly to the company and to you, the shareholders, than what we have today. I just want to make this obvious comment. So it's got to be palatable.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, more questions from the phone?
Your next one comes to the line of Emeric Paradis. Please ask your question.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Elisabeth Borne mentioned the French government is discussing with the European Commission to create a régie publique to manage the French hydro concessions. I'm just curious, what would it change for you, if any restructuring? Does this mean you would have to split out the hydro from the Blueco, or would you keep it? Any clarification would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a legal question, so I'm looking to the General Counsel, who is, as usual, enigmatic and smiling. So I was just trying to think what could we say about this. There is a system by which you can have a sort of direct control from the government into a economic activity, a business, if there are significant ways for the government to have direct control over it. And yes, indeed, we are looking into the legal framework that would mean that it could happen that maybe blue will have a sort of a separate entity, and don't ask me what entity means, a separate entity to manage the hydro power system that we own and that we manage today through these very specific rules. But these are legal matters which become questionable and complex. Why? Because there are very recent directives creating this possibility, and I will leave it there at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question, maybe from the phone.
Your final question comes to the line of Sam Ari. Please ask your question.
Oh, hi. Good morning. Thank you. Listen, I just wanted to add a quick follow-up on the earlier question about EDF Green. And I do understand your sort of general answer about preparing and waiting for the regulatory landscape. But can I just test if there's anything else you can say, even at the high level, in terms of when EDF Fair might come to market and how it might happen, or just directionally? I think expectations are that there might be, a squeeze out at some point, and then an IPO perhaps next year. But I don't know if that sounds right to you, or if there's any more sort of general guidance you can give us on that. And if time allows, another question that I think would love to hear your thoughts on is just more generally about the energy landscape in France. Obviously, the restructuring of EDF is a big change, but when we saw similar restructuring in Germany a few years ago, it was then followed by other deals and more restructuring later on. So I just wonder if you have a perspective on sort of EDF, NG, Total, how you think the French energy landscape might evolve in the 2020s. I'm sure that's difficult for you to speak for other companies, but from your perspective, I'm interested if you think creation of EDF there is the last step or the first step in a series of restructurings in the sector. Thank you.
Okay. Just I would like to say, because the line was not very good, or maybe I heard things which were not exactly the same during the beginning and the end of your question. First, we do not have at this stage any plans to list any of our current subsidiaries. And of course, investment backers are, as always, have unlimited imagination, but we have no plans to list any of our current subsidiaries. Secondly, indeed, if all this goes through, there is a new organization which puts together in what we call green a number of our activities, and we have described what would encompass renewables, sales, services, entities, a few other things. And indeed, the plan is that green will be able to be market listed, to draw money from the market, from the stock market, in order to accelerate, and this is absolutely key in our strategy, in order to accelerate in our energy transition efforts. And as you all know, right now, the effect of ARENH is that we are very constrained in our ability to accelerate in energy transition. We are missing opportunities to go faster towards a carbon neutral economy. So this is our plan, through green, not through any fancy or complicated sub-listing of sub-assets or whatever. Now, then you are asking a question regarding the landscape in France, and of course your question is fully valid, but we are not looking today at any transforming acquisitions regarding whether it's France, Europe or the world. We are not looking at any transforming acquisitions. We are looking at how we can grow our business in order to fulfill our carbon neutrality requirements and commitments. And in order to fulfill these commitments, we believe that the key, and what we will fully really focus on for the next couple of years, the key is getting, hopefully by 1/1/22, still doable, hopefully by 1/1/22, getting towards this new EDF group organization where EDF remains EDF, but organized differently in order that we can, on the one side, extend our nuclear fleet and build more nuclear reactors, which we absolutely need if France is going to meet its carbon neutrality commitments, and on the other hand, build through green a much better financed company, which we accelerate in the energy transition in France, not only in France, in order to be really ahead in the carbon neutrality curves. Thank you. And I guess this is the end of this conference, so I want to thank you very much for attending, for your excellent questions, and I wish you a very good Valentine's Day, which I guess is full of, I would say, fills our lives at least once a year. Thank you very much.